Hello and welcome to today's Hindu newspaper analysis of the Delhi edition from the editorial section. The Union Home Minister Amit Shah's statement recently saying that Hindi should replace English, as the link language and what the government work will increasingly be Hindi, has set up proverbial cat among the southern regions. The Hindi Hindutva Hindustan ideology that he represents is historically been imparent, has historically been imparent with the notion of the Indian multilingualism, which it sees a level undermining national unity rather than the proud showcase of diversity that our constitutional mechanism, nationalism celebrates. It has been a long-standing policy plank of the Hindutva movement that Hindi, the Indian language of northern and central Indian states, whereas the Bharatiya Janata Party, also known as BJP, sunk its deepest roots, should be the national language of India. BJP MP have frequently risen in the national parliament to demand that their preference be made law, part of Hindi promotion. Mr. Shah is only the latest shalvo of the several efforts by the Modi government to promote Hindi. These include the imposition of Hindi names on central program names Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and like others, instead of translation or neutral English level. Mr. Shah, only the latest salvo of the several efforts by the Modi government to promote Hindi includes the imposition of the Hindi names on central government programs such as Bharatiya Janata, and others. The Hindi instead of English, they use Hindi and airport announcement, the central government issuing media advertisement, in Hindi, and launching promotional campaigns including the Hindi script, even when the words used may be from the different Indian languages, and the practice of renaming well-known occasions or festivals only in Hindi Sanskrit, such as Teachers' Day as Guru Purnima. The latest controversy has revealed two essential truths about our country. The first is that whatever the Hindi chauvinist might say, we don't have no national language in India, but several. The second is that zealots have an unfortunate tendency to provoke a battle they will lose at a time when they were quietly winning the war, missing the point. In these other tongue of the sum of 50% our population, the percentage has growing thanks to the spectacular failure of population control in much of northern India. It is not, however, the mother tongue of the rest of us. When Hindi speakers emotionally decry the use of alien language imposed on the country by British colonialists and demand that Hindi be used because it speaks for the soul of India, or when they declare that Hindi is our mother, English is a stranger, their missing point two is over. First, because no Tamil or Bengali will accept Hindi is the language of her soul. The second, because injecting anti-English xenophobia into the argument is utterly irrelevant to the issue states. It is about efficiency. The government requirement that Hindi be privileges in official work actually militates against the interest of efficiency, obliging a Keralite bureaucrat in Delhi to write 5 notions in the Hindi to be submitted. A superior office from Odisha makes no sense, since neither man would be using a language with which he is eased to, obliging both to digest a complex argument by a UP subordinate writing in his mother tongue is a fair of to both. Both may write atrocious English for that matter, but it is the language in which they are equal and it serves to get work done. Language is a vehicle, not a destination. In government, it is a means, not an end. The Hindi walas fail to appreciate that since promoting Hindi for them is an end to itself. Vehicle of entertainment, not most important from here. This is most important article from here. In pandemic, for critical lessons for MSME, apart from suitable government policies, the management of small business must think of financial safety net. Okay, micro, small and medium enterprises are critical for achieving the overall objective of economic development. The sector is a significant contributor in terms of individual output, employment generation and the share in gross domestic product and export. But despite many initiatives by government since independence, the sector has been facing challenges in its quest for survival and growth. The COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed the vulnerability of the MSME sector during the pandemic. This sector was among the worst hit amount of the demand and supply shocks caused and the measures taken lender to curb the spread of infections. The sector is still struggling. The sector is still struggling to survive and recover from the pandemic-induced shock. The pandemic deep impact. Let us focus on the impact of COVID-19 on MSME. A recent study by the writers as a primary survey of 2 to 5 small firms located in the National Capital Region NCR and Uttarakhand observed that the turnover of around 90% of small firms had declined in financial year 2020 and 2021. Around 53% of the firms faced more than a 50% decline in their turnover. Around 29% of firms reported a collapse of their business. Around 53% observed a decrease in demand, while around 36% faced erratic supply. Erratic supply of raw materials. The main reasons for a fall in the turnover included restrictions on economic activities and mobilities, decreases in demand, shortage of raw materials, restrictions on trade, slow recovery of market, payment delays and labor shortage among others. These firms faced a 25% reduction in their employment, particularly in informal workers, segment that stood around 47%. Major challenges faced by firms in their revival, including delayed payment issue, reduced demand and lack of financial resources, supply chain disruptions, increased cost of production, lack of skilled workers, and most importantly, business uncertainties. Although most of the firms were aware about the initiative under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, only half of them found it to be any help. Given the lack of the demand and business uncertainties, firms did not find it rational to avail of financial assistance available under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package. A majority of firms suggested that government should have been more focused on creating a revival of demand for products and services. Lessons for resilience. Nevertheless, not all firms have suffered due to the pandemic-induced recession. Around 10% of the firms under study had either a rise in their turnover or reported no change. The key sectors these firms operated in include human health activities, manufacture of pharmaceuticals, medicinal, chemical, botanical products, food average activities, manufacturing of appeals, etc. The order of these firms also reported chemical, botanical products and food beverage services activities and manufacturing of appeals, etc. The owners of these firms also reported that they tried to quickly adopt to the use of e-commerce platforms and even switched to other business activities that had demand, that is production of masks, sanitizers, home delivery of products, etc. They exploited the opportunity using their own saving to invest in the areas that offered new opportunities. This highlights that a firm's resilience depends upon its financial resources and ability to invest in new technologies or new business opportunities. The firms that suffered, unlike the large firms, lacked financial planning for businesses uncertainties in order to overcome vulnerable shocks. Planning ahead. COVID-19 is neither the first pandemic nor is going to be the last. Even during the first 2 decades of this century, the world went through some other pandemic. SARS in 2002 and 4, H1N1 influenza in 2009, swine flu influenza in 2009, MERC 2002 and the Zika virus in 2015-16. COVID-19 has been the burst among them in 2020. Apart from the pandemic, there were also other factors such as sudden changes in government policies, bars, natural catastrophes such as floods and आपदाएं, droughts, etc., which caused business uncertainties affected. Small businesses, further bulk of MSME are in the informal sector which lack registration and the necessary financial documents to avail such benefits. These firms are at risk of shutting down after a large-scale disaster or economic shocks. Therefore, there is a need to develop a mechanism for MSME which should help rescue them from shutting down and support their revival during business uncertainties caused by economic shocks. In order to make the MSME sector resilient, be purpose, the provision of emergency funds for small business that should be made mandatory from the beginning. Similar to the Public Provident Fund, the government can initiate what is called the uncertainty corpus fund small businesses. This fund can be used to meet the financial needs of small firms during business uncertainties. It may be linked with the turnover. Firm could maintain a certain fraction of its turnover. Although it would be a forced saving, it would still be very useful for MSME during business uncertainties caused by economic shocks. The government should encourage small firms by assuring them a lucrative return on the investment through this fund. Another measure can be the small business insurance scheme, which can be similar to the term insurance. There are lessons to be learned from the crop insurance scheme, as there are more than 6.4 million MSME in the country. There is huge market potential for the insurance sector in our country. Such a scheme is framed properly. In order to encourage firms to invest in such an insurance scheme, the government may pay an initial premium or a fraction of the premium on behalf of such enterprises, particularly micro enterprises and on-account enterprises. Gaps in the budget. Although budget 2022-2023 seeks to lay a foundation and a blueprint to steer the economy over the Amrit Kal. Let's move to another article. State of adolescence learning. ASER highlights the dismal picture of the online education. Over the last few decades in India, there has been a massive government drive to push for universal enrollment extending to the secondary as well as primary school education. Successive annual status of education reports, also known as ASER, have down this drive has been largely successful for both groups, with high enrollment rates even during the pandemic. Despite 2 years of COVID-19 related school closures, the increase in unenrolled 11 to 14-year-old has been marginal, while the number of out of school 15 to 16 years old has actually fallen for both boys and girls. 15 हो पाएगा इसमें. This indicates that अभी उनको बोलूंगा मैं, रुक जा अभी. This indicates that has been able to return children beyond military school. This is remarkable because children are now enrolled beyond the age of compulsory education, and enrollment rates show almost no gender disparity, but enrollment is only one piece of the puzzle. Absence of learning, absence of a formal learning. Although efforts have been made by parents, teachers and governments, सबके द्वारा एफर्ट्स किए गए, लर्निंग एट होम थ्रू ऑनलाइन एजुकेशन ड्यूरिंग द पैंडेमिक हैज बीन far from successful for these children. ASER 2020 and ASER 2021 report brought to light a dismal picture of access to technology-based learning resources. Even though over 70% of children in class 11th and 12th had a smartphone at home, only 35% of them could use it for studies at all times, while 17% could not use it at all. बिल्कुल भी यूज नहीं करते हैं. In the absence of formal schooling, family members often assumed the task of teaching. ASER reports show adolescents did not fare well. Older children received less learning support as compared to younger ones. Additionally, some children, especially other older girls, faced competing demands due to financial stress and increased requirement of care work at home. Even in 2017, ASER had reported that almost 90% of female youth aged 14 to 18 did housework on a daily basis, compared to 3/4 of the male youth. According to the Building Back Better report by the UNICEF, Building Back report published by UNICEF, it is noted from here, school closures exacerbated girls and women's unpaid care work, limiting the time level to let and home. At home, COVID-19 girls might have had to replace the work done by the missing caregiver, or simply because of gendered expectation. ASER 2021 data hints at the same. When asked if any child in the household above 12 years of age had started helping out more with household chores since the lockdown, almost 2/3 of the respondents reported in the affirmative. In all age categories, girls were more likely than boys to be taking on this additional burden. For example, about 3/4 of 15-year-old girl had started helping out more with chores since the lockdown, a figure which was more than 10 percentage points higher than 15-year-old boys. Gender disparity. What is gender disparity? Gender disparity at home may have been aggravated in the pandemic, but it is not new. ASER report 2017 had found that 14 to 18-year-old youth aspirations were gendered, with the most male youth mentoring army, police and engineers, while female youth preferred teacher, doctor, nurse as their occupation. The kind of work children did during lockdown so that they are exposed to gendered expectation from a young age. A study using ASER, India Human Development Survey and National Family Health Survey and data suggests that long before the pandemic, gender disparity had started spilling over into learning outcomes too. The study found that female disadvantage persists in mathematics learning outcomes over the last decades and show no signs of disappearing. Study correlates his finding with repressive household practices. All of these points to an imminent need to integrate gender sanitization modules into criteria for adolescents education. A school-based gender sanitization program can play a transformative role in ensuring that all children get an equitable environment to grow. For example, an attitude change program in Haryana run by Breakthrough and evaluated by the Abdul Latif Jameel Poverty Action Lab, also known as JPAL, showed promising result with participants exhibiting gender equitable behaviors even 2 years after program ended. It was centered around interactive class discussions about gender equality. In secondary schools, scaling up such as programs for school and states help bring about more gender progressive views among communities. With the schools reopening, a gender equitable environment for their growth should be prioritized. As the world begins to recover from the effects of the pandemic, this is an opportunity to rebuild better, one which should not be missed. This article is important from here. And what is missed article? India and the UK crafting a new legacy. Despite the challenge posed by the bar, India-UK relationship has been on an upward trajectory. The war in Ukraine has brought unexpected changes in the world as global powers seek to recalibrate their foreign policies. India's position has been in the spotlight in the recent days, with New Delhi hosting diplomats and dignitaries from various countries. On March 31st, United Kingdom Foreign Secretary Elizabeth Truss visited New Delhi as a part of wider diplomatic push. She had visited India last October. Mr. Truss met the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and also participated in the inaugural edition of the India-UK Strategic Future Forum, a Track 1.5 dialogue, areas of cooperation. Despite the challenges posed by the Ukraine crisis, the India-UK relationship has been on an upward trajectory, exemplified by the conclusions of a comprehensive strategic partnership on May 4, 2021. The agreement also established a 2030 roadmap for India-UK relations, which primarily outlines the partnership plans for the bilateral relationship during her visit to New Delhi. Mr. Truss emphasized countering Russian aggression and reducing global strategic dependence on Moscow by underlying the importance of democracies working cohesively deterrence aggression. Furthermore, she highlighted the importance of developing deeper ties between Britain and India in the Indo-Pacific would not only result in job creation but also foster security in the region. She also furthered talks on defense-related trade, deepening cyber security and defense cooperation between the two countries. A new joint security program is set to be announced, which aims to protect online infrastructure in India and UK as both parties attempt to carry out joint exercise to combat threats from cyber criminals and renaissance. India and UK also plan to hold the first strategic technologic dialogue, a ministerial level summit on emerging technologies. What is Test and Conduct amending the Weapons of Mass Destruction Act? Why it is most important? What are the stipulations under the earlier action of 2005? Why did an amendment become necessary? Weapons of Mass on April 5, 2022, the Weapons of Mass Destruction and Their Delivery System Prohibition of Unlawful Activities Amendment Bill 2022 was introduced in Lok Sabha recently. It was passed the next day. The bill amended the WMD and Their Delivery Systems Prohibition of Unlawful Activities 2005, which prohibits the unlawful manufacture, transport and transfer of WMD chemical, biological and nuclear weapons and their means of delivery. It is popularly referred to as the WMD Act. The recent amendment extends the scope of banned activities to exclude financing of already prohibited activities. What are the purpose of the original WMD Act? The WMD Act, Their Delivery System Prohibition of Unlawful Activities, came into being in July 2005. Its primary objective was to provide an integrated and overarching legislation on prohibiting unlawful activity in relation to all three types of WMD, Their Delivery System, and related materials, equipment and technologies. It instituted penalties for contravention of these provisions, such as imprisonment for a term does not less 5 years as well as fine. The Act passed to meet an international obligation enforced by the UN Security Council Resolution 1540 of 2004. What is the UNSCR 1540? In April 2004, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 1450 to address the growing threat of non-state actors gaining access to WMD material, equipment or the technology to undertake acts of terrorism. In order to address this challenge to international peace and security, UNSCR 1540 established binding obligations on all UN member states under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. Nations were mandated to take and enforce effective measures against proliferation of WMD, their means of delivery and related materials to non-state actors. UNSCR 1540 enforces three primary obligations upon nation states: not to provide any form of support to non-state actors seeking to acquire WMD related materials or their means of delivery, to adopt and reinforce law criminalizing the possession and acquisition of such items by the non-state actors, to adopt and enforce domestic controls over relevant materials in order to prevent their proliferation. It was to meet these obligations that enactment and enforcement of legislation to punish the unlawful and unauthorized manufactures, acquisition, possession, development and transport of WMD become necessary. What has the amendment added to the existing Act? The amendment expands the scope to include prohibition of financing of any activity related to WMD and their delivery systems. To prevent such financing, the central government shall have the power to freeze, seize and attain funds, financial assets or economic resources of suspected individuals, whether owned, held or controlled directly or indirectly. It also prohibits persons from making finances or related services available for other persons indulging in such activity. Why was the amendment necessary? UNSCR 1540 undergoes periodic reviews to determine the success of its implementation and to identify gaps enforcement. In one such review undertaken in 2016, it was concluded that risk of proliferation to non-state actors is increasing due to rapid advancement in science, technology and international commerce. The statement of objections. What is the international significance of these legislations? What is in fact for India? Preventing acts of terrorism that involve WMD for their delivery system requires building a network of national and international measures in which all nations states are equally invested. Such actions are necessary to strengthen global enforcement of standards relating to the export of sensitive items and to prohibit even the financing of such activities, to ensure that non-state actors, including the terrorist and black market networks, do not against access to such materials. Sharing of best practices on legislation and their implementation can enable harmonization of global WMD controls. India initially had reservations on enacting law mandated by the UNSCR. This is not seen by India as an appropriated body for making such a demand. However, given the danger of WMD terrorism that India faces in view of that difficult neighborhood that inhabits, the country supported the resolution and has fulfilled its requirements. It is in India's interest to facilitate highest controls at the international level and adopt them at the domestic level. Having now adopted its own legislation, India can demand the same others, especially from those in its neighborhood that have a history of proliferation and among supporting terrorist organizations. On making Kannada mandatory UG courses, can Kannada prescribed as mandatory language under the National Education Policy 2020? How has the center reached? Center raised the art and science of a good IS interview. To do well, it is imperative to ensure that the discussion is focused on one's strong points. What is it is questions regarding your IS interview from here. Making a difference, the IAS as a career, Yogendra Narayan ki hai. When he joined the Indian Administrative Service in 1978, Alok Ranjan was allotted to Uttar Pradesh cadre and served in various assignments in the state governments as well as at the center. He retired in 2016 as Chief Secretary of UP. His new book, Making a Difference, the IS as a Career, provides an insider view about the IS, starting with the daunting exam and edited experts. In the 70s, when I wrote the IAS exam, I was the cherished dream of almost every young boy and girl. career options were not as plentiful as they are today, and the IAS was what everyone aspired for. It was an obsessive desire not only of candidates but parents, relatives, neighbors, and other community peoples. So all pervasive was this fascination for the IAS that taking the exam was akin to a national hobby. Irrespective of academic ability or talent, every young person tried their hand at the IAS exam. Success in the exam meant sudden elevation to topmost level in society, and failure meant frustration and sadness. Today things may be different with multiple career avenues and different definitions of success, but it still remains the dream for countless youth. In UP, Bihar and Odisha, which are economically backward state in our country, this fascination for IAS is very intense. A question people often ask me is, when should a person start preparing for IAS exam? So there is no doubt that it is one of the toughest exams in the country, having a large number of written papers and personality tests. Several lakh aspirants vie for the coveted 100 odd vacancies in the IAS in a particular year, and about 100 and 700 in all civil services put together. The competition is intense and requires massive preparation. The competition is intense and requires massive preparation for the IAS examination. It requires a lot of determination to work long hours for several months at a stretch to be able to compete. I would say that at least one full year of uninterrupted preparation must go into the getting into the IAS exam. Once you qualify in the written exam, the personality test or interview follow. The interview is essential to test the communication and logical skills of a candidate along with his general awarenesses and theory. The personality of an individual makes a big difference in the way he performs his job and can take on leadership responsibilities. Of course, there is the limitation of language, but now the UPSC allows you to take your interview in any recognized language. Moreover, it is not merely the fluency or style that matters, but the content. The interview board is not expected to test your knowledge, but about your subject. This has been done in the written examinations. They are expected to assess how you analyze issues. Okay, it assesses your viewpoint, your ability to communicate and convince. The board also assesses your attitude. The board also assesses your attitude, behavior, bearing and other personality traits. In a tangle, this is the story of my IAS interview, which nearly became a disaster. My interview started beautifully with some general questions asked by the chairman and then the first member, who was a retired ambassador, and he started talking to me about books. As reading was my hobby, and I eloquently spoke about authors and my favorite books. Authors like Ernest Hemingway and Gabriel Garcia Marquez were discussed, and I performed brilliantly, as this was like batting on home turf for me. He even favorably opined that I should have considered the Indian Foreign Services IFS as my first option, but I persisted by saying that I preferred the IAS exam. The next member was an astrophysicist of great repute. He started by asking me if I had read any books on science. I told him that Origin of Species by Charles Darwin was my favorite. Evidently, this was not in his area of interest. He then asked me if I had read any science fiction. I told him that I was not a great fan of science fiction, but I had read a couple of books by Arthur Clarke and had particularly liked Rende Jobs with Rama. He had not read this book and so he did not respond. He then asked me to name top Indian scientists. I mentioned C.B. Raman, F.C. Bose and J.C. Bose. He asked me about the contribution of Raman and I answered Raman's effect. The next question was at least expected. What is Raman effect? Please explain. I had read generally about Raman effect and I made the mistake of answering. I was not very confident and a little hesitant in my reply. He said, "You are right, but something more." I tried to clarify that I was not a student of science but of economics and management. Yet I hazarded to answer further and got myself into a tangle. At this stage, instead of answering, I should have formally, "I am sorry. I don't know, sir, I am not a student of science." This could have put an end to this line of questioning, my continuous attempt to answer or encouraging the board members to persist. The art of doing well in the interview is to focus the discussion on your strong point. And if a board member is asking your questions about which you are not very sure, then it is best to maneuver your way out of it as quickly as possible. Exerted with permission from Penguin Random House, India. So this concludes for today's Hindu newspaper analysis. So thanks for watching.